There was once a man who lived in a small village nestled between two mountains. He was known for his temper, a fire that burned so fiercely it seemed to consume everything in its path. His anger was legendary, a storm that could erupt without warning, leaving destruction in its wake. The villagers called him the Thunder, not out of respect, but out of fear. They avoided him, whispered about him, and prayed he would never turn his rage their way. But the man didn't care. He wore his anger like armor, believing it made him strong, invincible, until one day, it didn't. It began with a simple argument. A neighbor's goat had wandered into his garden, trampling the vegetables he had worked so hard to grow. The man stormed out of his house, his face red, his voice shaking the air. The neighbor, a frail old woman, tried to apologize, but her words were drowned out by his fury. He shouted until his throat was raw, until the old woman retreated to her home in tears. And then, as he stood there, chest heaving, he noticed something strange. The goat was still there, chewing on a cabbage leaf, utterly unbothered by his outburst. It didn't care about his anger. It didn't fear him. It simply existed, indifferent to the storm raging around it. That moment lingered in his mind, a quiet itch he couldn't scratch. For the first time, he wondered if his anger was as powerful as he believed. If it could be so easily ignored by a goat, what did it truly accomplish? That night, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the question gnawing at him. He thought about all the times he had lashed out, all the bridges he had burned, all the relationships he had destroyed, and for the first time, he felt the weight of it, not as strength, but as a burden. The next morning, he decided to leave the village. He didn't know where he was going, only that he needed to find something beyond the anger that had defined him for so long. He packed a small bag and set off into the mountains, following a narrow trail that wound its way through the trees. The higher he climbed, the quieter the world became. The noise of the village faded, replaced by the rustle of leaves and the distant call of birds. He walked for hours, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts, until he reached a clearing at the top of the mountain. There, sitting on a rock, was an old man. The old man was thin, his face weathered by time, his eyes sharp and clear. He didn't seem surprised to see the man. In fact, he smiled as if he had been expecting him. "You've come a long way," the old man said, his voice calm and steady. The man hesitated, unsure of what to say. He hadn't planned this encounter, hadn't even known the old man existed. But something about the way the old man looked at him, as if he could see straight through the anger, straight to the heart of him, made him sit down. "I don't know why I'm here," the man admitted, his voice quieter than usual. The old man nodded, as if this made perfect sense. "Anger is a heavy thing to carry," he said. "It weighs you down, makes the journey harder than it needs to be." The man frowned. "But anger is strength," he argued. "It protects me. It makes people respect me." The old man chuckled softly. "Does it? Or does it just make them afraid?" The man opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. He thought about the goat, about the old woman, about the way the villagers avoided him, and he realized, with a sinking feeling, that the old man was right. For days, the man stayed in the clearing, talking with the old man, listening to his stories, his wisdom. The old man spoke of patience, of understanding, of the power of silence. He told the man that anger was like a fire, it could warm you, protect you, but if left unchecked, it would consume everything. The key, the old man said, is not to extinguish the fire, but to control it, to use it when necessary, and to let it rest when it's not. The man listened, his mind slowly beginning to shift. He realized that his anger had never been his strength, it had been his prison. And for the first time, he felt the bars begin to loosen. One morning, the man woke to find the old man gone. In his place was a small, smooth stone, etched with a single word, breathe. The man picked up the stone, turning it over in his hands. He didn't know if the old man had left it for him or if it had always been there. But he took it as a sign. He placed the stone in his pocket and began the journey back down the mountain. When he returned to the village, he was different. The fire was still there, but it was quieter, more controlled. He no longer lashed out at every provocation. Instead, he paused, took a breath, and chose his response. The villagers noticed the change. Though they didn't understand it, they still called him the Thunder. But now it was said with a hint of curiosity, even respect. And the man, for the first time in his life, felt at peace. Years later, as he sat in his garden, watching the goats graze peacefully, he thought about the old man and the stone in his pocket. He realized that emotional mastery wasn't about never feeling anger, fear, or pain. It was about understanding those emotions, acknowledging them, and choosing how to act. It was about finding the balance between fire and stillness, between storm and calm. And as he sat there, breathing deeply, he knew he had found it.